Welcome to the world of Pokemon. I am your professor, Professor Zoom, and I'm going to tell you today how the world of Pokemon is completely and utterly unethical. Like, oh my god, if we were to take Pokemon and bring it into the real world, it doesn't translate very well. Everybody talks about how they like Pokemon, but if Pokemon was actually in the real world, we probably would not like it as much. Not nearly as much. It is so unethical that there are things that correlate to the real world that already is unethical. And I'll get into it. So let me just preface it this way. If you haven't looked at my channel before, I obviously like Pokemon. Like, all my best videos so far have been related to Pokemon. So why stop? But the gears started turning in my head, and I'm like, what about Pokemon do people like so much? And then I started getting into like philosophy and ethics of Pokemon, and that is a dangerous road to go down. I just thought of the three quickest things in my brain of things that happen in the world of Pokemon that may or may not translate well to the real world. So today we are going to answer the question, is Pokemon unethical? Is the world of Pokemon unethical? If we brought it to the real world, would it be unethical or would it be ethical? So let's start with something, probably the lowest form of Pokemon that might be acceptable in the real world. And that is Pokemon as pets. Now, if you ever catch me looking down, I literally wrote out like a whole essay on this. Domestication of animals in the real world, super common, legal. We have domesticated dogs, domesticated cats, and all that kind of stuff. So domesticating Pokemon, they're just wild animals as well that we could eventually domesticate. So it's not too out of bounds. It is not too out of bounds to say that domesticating Pokemon is unethical. But then you gotta think, there are so many different types of Pokemon, and they're not all just dogs and cats. So what happens when you don't have a dog or a cat Pokemon and you domesticate it? Like domesticating a Groudon. Can you really domesticate a Groudon? Not really. Like they show on the TV show of like domesticating Fidough, like the weird doe dog looking Pokemon, Meowth. So things that look like domesticatable animals get domesticated, but then like super good legendaries or like Charizard. Charizard isn't really a domesticated Pokemon. You do not just keep it in your house. So they really only domesticate the cute and cuddly ones. But even the cute and cuddly ones are scary. I mean, I would not want to have a Purugly as a domesticated animal in my house. I don't need the Fury Swipes. I really don't need it. Because all these Pokemons have moves. Moves that harm not only Pokemon, but humans too. Like, dogs, yes, they could scratch you, they can bite you, and that is a couple of the moves in Pokemon. But like, if I had a Boutland in my room and it decided to use Thunderfang on me, it probably would not go that well. I would be pretty much concerned for my life. Also, yet again, there's so many different types of Pokemon. Think of all the bear type Pokemon. I'll name two. Think of Beartic and think of Ursaring. Now, if you look at these two, they're just bears. Do we domesticate bears in the real world? No, we do not. And for good reason, too. Because they are wild animals that actually shouldn't be domesticated. So, can Pokemon be pets? Is it ethical to keep Pokemon as pets? Kind of. It depends. We're kind of in this gray area. And this is the simple one. Because if we go into the real reason of why people like Pokemon, they like it for the battle mechanic. The battle mechanic is so dangerous. It's animal fighting. It's just pure animal fighting. Animal fighting has existed in the real world. It is dated all the way back to Shakespearean times. Yes, Shakespeare himself would put on a play in a theater, and next to the theater, they would have dog fights and chicken fights. And like people would gamble and do those fights, and then they would go into the theater. Those were completely not sanctioned, first off, but then they were also deemed unethical and illegal. You're technically not allowed to run an illegal animal fighting ring. It's just animal cruelty at its finest. And that's what every Pokemon battle is. Every Pokemon battle is, hey, I'm going to send out my domesticated animal, you send out your domesticated animal, and let them fight until one of them knocks out. And then I'll give you money if I lose. Like, that's just what it is. So if it's not ethical in the real world, why are we even considering it being ethical in the Pokemon world? Why do we like it so much? It's so interesting. But like, Pokemon battling can go broader. What about Pokemon competitions in general? Because I thought of two other things that happen in the Pokemon games and the Pokemon TV shows that are kind of interesting. What about the beauty pageants that they have for Pokemon? Now, sometimes they make Pokemon do moves, but if you take that away, I guess it's not that bad. We got those in the real world too. I mean, look at every Thanksgiving in the United States. You have the National Dog Show, where you just bring every type of breed of dog, and then they get graded on their beauty and their hygiene and all of that kind of stuff for the year. So we think it's fine. We think it's ethical in the real world. So I guess it is ethical in the world of Pokemon. So, hey, look, boom, first win. Gotta take it when we got it. The other thing that I thought about, kind of leaning back into that whole gambling world, is racing. So, like, in the real world, we got, like, horse races. We deem that as ethical. There are some very unethical parts of it, but it's legal. I mean, it's sanctioned. You can go to an actual, like, horse racing stadium and bet. So overall, I guess it's okay, and it's a little bit of a gray area, but overall, fine. And I think it translates pretty well to the Pokemon world, too. An example from the movie Pokemon Heroes, the whole movie opens with Ash on top of this, like, water chariot, and one of his, I think it was Lapras, I'm guessing it was Lapras, dragging him along the water chariot. I'm gonna toss a picture if I'm wrong. But that's what it was. It was just horse racing, but in the water, and it was just their Pokemon. So I guess that's okay. I guess that's fine. There we go. Boom. Another ethical thumbs up. Okay, and the other one, which is kind of like something we forget about a lot, but it happens a lot in Pokemon. Pokemon as workers. Like as actual function employees at a job. Most commonly you see like your timbers, conkelders at in a construction site. That was the example that I was kind of at first. But they're being employed to do a job. Do they make a salary? Do they get benefits? Do they get paid time off? Like how much do we actually give these Pokemon? Or do we give them nothing? And I think that difference matters. I think it genuinely matters. I mean, look at the real world. I'm not saying it's one-to-one here. But a lot of places in the world have child labor laws that prevent children from working because they're not teenagers. They do not necessarily have a voice for themselves enough to stand up for themselves. They often get put in dangerous and harsh conditions. So, little sketchy. We're not too sure about that. We don't let children do it. And granted, I know there are jobs where it's like dog sledding uses animals, but I think that's a little different. I think that's different because we're not building buildings using Pokemon. So yeah, child labor laws are kind of like, are there Pokemon labor laws if we have child labor laws? I think that's pretty fair. I think they deserve it in a way. Because Pokemon can easily be taken advantage of. I mean, unless you're a Pikachu on a rare occasion, or Meowth that was chemically treated to speak, most Pokemon cannot speak for themselves. Which then, the ethicality becomes, is there somebody to speak for them? And how are they getting this job? So if I was a trainer, and I was working at a construction site, and I had a Pokemon to help me do it, I am that Pokemon's advocate. So I think that's okay. I think that's fine. There's somebody that can speak for the Pokemon and make sure the Pokemon is doing their work, but they're doing their work and they're getting fair conditions and treated correctly. The other part that sounds really sketchy is if the company owns the Pokemon and are using the Pokemon for work, but they just own the Pokemon. The sole purpose of that Pokemon is to work for the company. Now, there is a real world translation. I'm gonna let it up to the imagination. Think of a time in the world's history. Now, I'm not trying to say that Pokemon and people are the same. But doesn't it kind of seem weird? Like, I really don't think Pokemon as workers work. It is kind of unethical. Which then brings us back to the whole question of how much should we relate Pokemon to humans? How much personification do we give to Pokemon? And there's something in philosophy called moral status. Moral status is this idea of how much value we give to something as much of a person. So how much value do we compare to ourselves? Are they superior to us, inferior to us, or are they the same? That's very important to think about. Pokemon, I feel like in a lot of ways, are superior to us. They are stronger than us. They could be heavier or extremely lighter than us, taller than us, shorter than us. They can kind of do a lot of things that we can't do. But besides the point, here is a common example for moral status. If I'm kicking a rock down the road, nobody's going to care. It's a rock. So I can just kick it down the road, nothing wrong. But if I was kicking a living, breathing dog down the road, people would be very, very frustrated with me. Because that we give dogs, cats, any type of animal, any type of living, sentient being, we give it moral status. I mean, people people get all up in arms when people cut down trees because some people give trees moral status. So if we're giving trees moral status, we're obviously giving Pokemon moral status. Here's my gray area. I kick a rock down the road, nobody bats an eye. What if I just a Geodude down the road? It's a rock. It's a rock. But it's also a Pokemon. It also recognizes that I'm kicking it down the street. So, no, it's not really ethical for me to kick a Geodude down the street. So all of this wrapped up in a pretty bow just kind of gives me this idea of, wow, the Pokemon world is not all that it seems. I'm surprised we like it so much. But hey, let me know other things in Pokemon and whether you think they are ethical or not. Because I'm sure I forgot many things that happened both in the TV shows, the mangas, and the video games. There's so many different things in this vast world of Pokemon that could be deemed ethical or unethical. So let me know. Also, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions upon the unethical world of Pokemon down in the description. But that is everything. I will catch you later.